Morning, everybody. Welcome to the last day of Renaissance. Glad you all actually woke up and got here. This is the faithful. This morning, we're going to talk about quality, and if we switch over the slides real quick. I have a GitHub repo address up here for everybody to look at. And this is where all of our slides are and all of the sample code that you'll see today. So if you jot this down or just go to Scott42 on GitHub, you'll find it. It's pretty easy. Again, my contact information is here if you want to get a hold of me after the session. And I just want to relay a little story about why we're here. In my early days of iOS development, I was so proud that whenever I'd log into iTunes Connect, there was 0 crash reports. And I thought that meant my app was awesome, right? I didn't know better. Then I found out, well, you know, maybe 1 in 100 crashes actually ends up on iTunes Connect. It's that 99% of the people who, when they first set up their device, it says, hey, would you like to send information to Apple? Yes or no? They say no. Well, guess what? That device will never send crash reports to Apple anymore. So you'll never, ever know if anything ever happened on that user's device. So you're going to hear some ways that you can make your app better through testing and also crash reporting and how you can hopefully avoid those crashes in the field and basically make your life a lot easier. So first up, we have Dirk, who's going to tell us a little bit about human testing.
Thanks. Are we there? Yes, there we are. Good morning, everyone. First session. My name is Dirk, and I'm the founder of MorbTest. And yes, I have a funny last name. I'm going to talk today about human testing. And let's first talk about quality. So what is quality? Well, you can see app has high quality if the app works technically as intended. But I think if you want to be successful and have huge number of users, you want to look at more aspects of your application. So let's look also at, does your app actually offer value? Is it intuitive and easy to use? So therefore, I would like to talk about manual QA testing, but also about user testing in all kinds of forms. So we're talking about concept testing, usability testing, obviously beta testing, and live testing. Because I say, if you want to, we should test to create better apps and not just bug-free apps. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you're going to be, it's kind of off. If you're going to be testing, make sure you do it before launch, because launch is a very important moment for iOS applications. If your app is of high quality, you might get featured by Apple. Your initial ratings also have a huge impact on the subsequent downloads. And if you're lucky enough to reach the top 25 in a certain category, that generally happens like the few weeks after launching. So make sure you're ready for that moment, because if you have a critical issue and you need to fix it, you have that pesky review process of Apple that will take 1 or 2 weeks. All right. So what you're going to do first is figure out, are you actually working on an app that has value to users? Do concept testing. So how you do it, first you find respondents. This is not actually that easy. It means that you have to figure out who is actually your user, how they're going to be using it. Make sure you get people out of that testing, out of that target market into your panel, because otherwise their answer is not going to be that interesting to you. Then you can do an interview. Make sure you ask factual questions. If you bring somebody in, you pay them money, you ask them, do you like this idea? They're going to say yes. So ask factual questions about what you do now, how often do you do it, and how are we going to be able to change that with this new application for you. If you want to show them, explain to them what your app is all about, the best way to do it is actually show a mock-up or a prototype. Now this is a very simple paper one. You can just glue it on top of an iPhone and will give already a pretty good idea of how users can use your application. What's better is to actually have a clickable prototype. And this is a very nice tool. It's pretty new. It's called Prototyper by a company called AppGyver. What you can do is you can have a designer create some images. You upload it to their website. You can create action areas, so you can actually touch on the screen and have some animations and have some transactions from one view to another. So what you do is you send out an email to the user. They will have to download the viewer application once. They can open up your prototype and actually have a fairly good idea of the kind of app you're trying to build. Usability testing is also really important. Our users have become really spoiled because I think as an industry we've become really good at actually building nice to use applications. So that means that first minute a user will be interacting with your application is vital. Make sure they actually understand your application and know how to use it. So there's multiple ways you can do it. You can do it in person or you can do it remotely. If you're going to do it in person, you just get some people from Craigslist, ask them to meet in your office or in the coffee shop, and you give them instructions with very minimal instructions. You only ask them about the end result. So you ask them, okay, book a room or get a flight. You let them think out loud so you can understand what their mental process is, and you observe how they're using the application. You look at a facial expression, and you look at a posture. So you can just do it like here, very easy in person. Now, a few tests like this is very simple to do, but at some point, you actually want to start recording it, because recording is much easier to remember for yourself, but it's also easier to explain to the rest of your team what actually happened. Now, that's kind of problematic, to be honest. It's difficult to do it on the device itself because you want to record both the touches and the expression of the user. So you have to resort to other ways. Now, this is kind of over the top, kind of expensive, and kind of hard to do. But it will show now what you would actually want to. In the field, having multiple cameras, audio, and log everything in video format. A little bit more simple to do is like this. So you see that person there is actually holding a laptop with the camera looking at the phone, so you can record it over Skype. Very easy way to do it. Or there are people that now create like these DUI cameras to record how people are using the application. You can also go remotely. If you go remote, it means that you're going to go more for a data approach, more of a quantitative approach. Get a larger group. You give the same instructions, so only focus on the end result. What you want to do is, inside of your application, track what these users are actually doing with it. So are they actually achieving the end result, and how much time does it take them? Another thing you can do is just ask them questions later on in the survey. So usability testing, what should you look for? Well, does it work as the user expects? So a user will go in with a mental model expecting certain things, how the application will work. Does it match? Discoverability is really important. So how fast can somebody learn how your application works? Is it easy to figure out, or are there a lot of hidden areas with swipes that take some time to figure out how to use it? Look at areas of confusion where somebody's just looking around and switching back and forward. That's really important. That's an indicator like, hey, you're not doing something right here in this area. You need to make it more clear. And in general, look at a positive experience. You want somebody to like using your application, not only be effective. Now, you're done with usability testing. You're about to launch your application. Obviously, you want to do your beta testing. You do it because you want to get final feedback from users. Also, you want to start doing some integration testing with like real data, figure out how your system performs. And one last thing also is like you want to get your early adopters ready to know about your application so that they know once you launch what the value of your application is. You can reach out to them and ask them to like, hey, could you write a nice review and give a 5-star rating? That's going to be helpful. So how you do it? Well, you need to recruit testers, obviously. Get a decent number. So you can do it through your own network or through a service. And then you have the whole process that we all know that's so painful with getting them to give you your UDID to create the ad hoc build. And yes, that 100 device limit is becoming kind of a pain, actually. So one other thing is when you do beta testing, the actual amount of people that will respond to you is going to be not as high as you like to. So between 10 and 30% of people will actually respond. So that means you need to reward them if they get feedback. Otherwise, 10%, you send out 100 applications, you only get feedback from 10, that's not a whole lot. All right, you're almost done with the beta testing. Now let's go to QA. QA is important, and yes, even Apple doesn't always do it 100% correctly. In the GitHub repository, what I've done is I have put a few documents that are checklists that you can use to do your own testing. So they're now in the Renaissance repository, but later on I'll get them back to the mob test repository. And there is a public repository, so please check them out. And if you want to contribute, then please let me know. So if you're going to do QA testing, the main goal is to make sure that your app works technically fine, doesn't crash, really important. Well, the way to do is get somebody to write a test plan, and for that, get a good testing engineer. The test plan has to be pretty detailed, and obviously, you write it, and then you get people to actually execute on it. So what should be in the test plan? Well, first, you should have a very structured plan where you line out all the specific steps that a tester should be doing while testing your application. So whereas with usability testing, you want to keep it as minimal as possible, with QA testing, you want to make it very, very extensive. These kind of scripts, by the way, are also excellent to give to your automation people. So later on, if you're going to be using automated testing, make sure you already have these scripts. Now, these scripts are really good to have, but you should also ask testers to just go in and break stuff. Because users will do it also. They will do stupid things, and you didn't think of that, and it will crash your application. So also ask that kind of attitude from your testers. So just go in, reward them also by the bug, and get them to actually break your application. Now, what are the things to look for? Obviously, hardware models and OS versions. Make sure you have a list of what you will and will not cover. It's not as bad in the iOS world as in Android. Our Android friends have to figure out 1,500 devices. In iOS, it's not that bad. So get a list of like 10 or 15 hardware models times operating systems that you will support, and make sure you actually test on them. It's just a shame if you get broken reports from just people using a different version of an OS that you didn't test on. Another thing that is also very important to test with all these devices is what happens with different connectivities. Yes, an iPhone should always be online, but guess what? AT&T and all the others are not always giving you service. You might be indoors somewhere where there's no Wi-Fi. How does the app behave when there's no connection or with a slow connection? It's really important to test that and to make sure that the application is always consistent. Another thing to look at with manual testing is gestures and moves and tilting and multi-touch. It's kind of hard to automate, so get your testers to have a good look at it. Another one is location and geofencing. It's kind of hard to do automated also, so get them to go outside, and if your application make use of location data, make sure it actually is tested pretty well. So now you're live, and it doesn't stop there. Keep on testing. So with websites, A/B testing is much easier to do. There's much HTML. It's much easier to inject code and to change around your website. You can do it also with iOS. It just means you have to do a lot of coding yourself. So option A and option B, you have to code yourself. And then there are frameworks like Clutch.io or Switchboard that will help you to randomize different options across different users and to track results. And you can learn a lot from A/B testing, so I really advise you to do that. Another thing, obviously, you should set up statistics with Flurry or Google Analytics, and not only look at how many people are using it every day, but also go in depth and see what areas of the application you're actually using. What are they not, and what should you be focusing on? Obviously, as crash log reporting is really important, so look at the analysis. You can use the iTunes reporting, but there are several tools out there that you can use, like Criticism or Crashlytics. And that will tell you what's going on with your live application and see if there's serious bugs out there that you need to be fixing. Another thing that you should reconsider is putting in feedback options for the user. And there's two things for that. One, obviously, yes, you want to know what they think and what could be improved. But the second thing is, like, whenever a user encounters an issue and they get frustrated, they need to vent their frustration. One way would be go to iTunes Store and give you a 1-star rating. You probably want to avoid that, so please go in and give them the feedback option. You can do it really simple. Like to the left, you can see there's just a very simple mail form you can have inside of your application. Get them to send that with some information about your application. AppsFire also has these libraries that you can use inside of your application and has a nice backend where you can track what's going on there. All right. Last, something to read. This is a book that's not out yet, but you can download an EPUB version. It's a really nice book by a Canadian called Jonathan Cole. It's called Tab into Mobile Testing, and I really recommend you to buy it right now. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Morning, everyone. So my name is Justin Shacklett. I work at this company called Grill Logic. We make a functional testing tool, but I'm not really going to talk directly anything at all about that. Instead, I'm going to talk more about automated testing. What is automated testing? What does it do for you? Why should you actually test? Why should you not test? Everyone kind of has their own definition of quality, and Dirk already talked about it, but here's a couple of definitions. I could just define quality by my app makes money. It doesn't really matter how buggy it is. And believe me, right? I mean, everyone knows. Look at the top 10 grossing apps. Are they bug free? Do they have the greatest user experience? I play a bunch of say Dragon Veil, for example. Is anyone here from Backflip Studios? Okay, so Dragon Veil is super buggy. Crashes all the time. It crashes, it crashes at least 20% of the time. You get thrown back to what they've actually done is they have a good job of taking your money. It does that flawlessly, as far as I can tell. And when it crashes, it just dumps you back and shoves you right back into the app. So they do a good job of just ramming you back into the experience. But their app is very buggy. So maybe, a lot of people say, well, it just really looks great. It just looks awesome. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful app. That's an okay definition of quality. It's really immersive. You just get sucked in. Away you go. My favorite. I'm a developer. I write code. I just want the code to be beautiful. I don't really care if the app works or it makes any money. If the code is beautiful, that makes me happy, right? That's my personal definition of quality. And then lastly, a lot of people think quality is just no bugs, and of course all three of us are going to tell you that quality is no bugs. And how we're going to tell you to get no bugs is more, better, smarter testing, right? That's our solution for quality. And there's kind of, each three of us is going to have a kind of nuance to that solution. So, so one of the things is really good to think about is why test, right? So quality, that's the goal, right? There's this process that everyone goes through where you kind of get the bugs out of your application. Does anyone know what that's called? That's called debugging, right? That has really nothing to do with quality at some level, right? And my boss said, I told him, that's called debugging. He's like, well, that's really subtle. No one's going to get that. Of course, bugs are related to quality. But, right, I mean, he's right. I'm like, whatever, boss. So it's really, testing is about quality. Debugging is about fixing bugs. And it's a very subtle distinction, but it's a real one. And if you want to have success and you want to, part of your definition of quality is squeezing out all the bugs, you need to test in addition to debug. A lot of people say, regression protection. You don't want someone working over here messing something up over here. You have a big team. They don't know what's going on. Regression protection is a really important reason of why we test. And lastly, to me, it really all comes down to risk management, right? So when I'm being wearing my indie developer hat and I'm at home hacking away on some game that's never going to get released, I don't have any tests at all, ever. Morons, so I take the, somewhat silly view of why should I test this, right? So that would be a bad idea, So it's risk versus reward. If I was working at a bank and I was building a banking app, yeah, there'd be tests. There'd be a lot of them, and we'd work really hard on them. So risk versus reward is a really important thing to consider. You can kill yourself writing too much tests. So just kind of digging in a little bit deeper, kind of here's what I view as the feature lifecycle. And unfortunately, I've worked on a lot of projects. This is kind of to scale, right? Like 10% of the time you're writing code, which is a little bit ridiculous. When I'm home by myself, I try to spend like 95% of the time writing code and the other 5% like messing with iTunes Connect, and minimizing that piece. But when I'm at work and I'm wearing my, hey, I'm a consultant, I'm going to help you write good software. I'm going to help you write quality software. Writing code is like the tiniest little piece of what you do. You do the developers, you do all this testing. There's a unit test and integration tests and test-driven development and behavior-driven development. There's functional tests, and developers actually do a ton of manual testing. You add a feature, what do? You press the run button and you look at it. That's manual testing. You're doing that. You, the developer, are already doing manual testing. And then they have these whole things like QA departments and QA engineers and embedded QA and all this other amazing stuff that kind of happens after the developer has called it, good. And then there's even more testing that takes place in certain situations. You're like, oh no, this has got to be load tested or performance tested or beta tested or blah, 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 down the list. That's other pieces that you got to take on. And then there's the acceptance testing, right? So the Scrum Master or the product owner comes along and says, well, I don't like how you implemented this feature. I don't like it. You didn't meet the spec, right? And you just go grumble and you go back and you work on it some more. But there's this like other person that kind of makes sure that what you did is right. So who does this work, right? So at the top, coding and kind of that initial round of testing and writing the unit tests, that's all developers, right? So the more testing the developers do, the less code they generate. And then, kind of QA is responsible for like all the QA stuff, right? In theoretically, they're kind of responsible for quality, which is somewhat disappointing since it seems like the QA people get paid the least amount of money. You're putting them in charge of quality because you have some equation in your head that says, if I release a quality app, I'm going to make a bunch of money. Seems like that math doesn't really work out a lot of times. So what's a plan? So when I do consulting and when people ask, well, how do you fix this problem? How do you get more efficient? How do you have your developers write more code and your testers test better? I think of kind of crushing that stack. I want to smush it. I want to keep the code chunk as big as possible. I want to mash everything else. And, the most magic solution to kind of helping the developers write less tests and the QA, do less tests is this magical thing called automation. And there's this magical tool called Jenkins that helps you do automation. And if you don't know what that is, you're not going to be able to follow the plan. And so kind of how does it work? Well, every time you write a unit test, or every time you write an integration test, or every time your developer writes a functional test, whether it's in UI automation or anything else, you put that into automation. Jenkins does that. Jenkins will now do that for you every time. You're not going to do that anymore. Jenkins is the computer is going to do that, provide that lift for you. And then you go over to QA and you look at their test plan, and it's really long. And you take it and you turn it into code and you throw it in the rest of it in the trash. And your QA people test the important pieces manually that they need to test. Some stuff is really hard to test for the computer to test. And kind of like Dirk said, stuff like geolocation and fencing, you can write a test for that, but it's not, you're just going to make the code behave the way that so your test passes. That's not a real test, per se. It's kind of just an experiment where you figured out that pathway works. And then the next piece of that is kind of, you need to be fully automated. A lot of people say, I have automated tests. I'm like, okay, is Jenkins running them all the time? No. Well, how do you run them? Well, you just click on this little thing here where, when you make an Xcode project, you just say, make me some tests, and you just write them in there, and whenever you want to run them, you just run them. Or the build runs them. Yeah, whatever. That's not automated testing. That's the computer does the testing, kind of helps you do the testing. Fully automated tests is the computer just does it, right? You hook up Jenkins, to just do it, to send email to your boss that said, you broke the code. People have that great Jenkins hack where it, turns the Nerf gun and shoots you in the back of the head. That's awesome. That's a worthwhile development effort. So automate everything, all your unit tests, all your integration tests, all your functional tests, whether it's MonkeyTalk or UI automation or KIF or Calabash or any of the, functional testing frameworks, automate them. Jenkins really is your friend. And one of the things you got to think about is, you got to architect or re-architect for test. If you're committed to testing, and you have an app that's hard to test, that's your fault. You made it hard to test. Apps aren't by definition hard to test just because you say they are. You think about how to inject known data, how to have like little hooks where you can stuff in known values and known inputs and get known results. That's your fault, the architect's fault. And then of course there's this horrible dirty secret that all the tester people don't tell you. And when someone's paying me, I never tell them this, right? It's just don't test. Like, that's this kind of magical thing. You need to know what to test. You don't just say test, and more testing is better. Tim of course said it. Don't say any bad things, but we at work lovingly refer to this as the 2 condom problem. So someone told Johnny that condoms provide protection, so he just uses 2 because he wants to be extra safe. Testers do that, and developers say, I want to be extra safe, I'm going to write a lot of tests. That's a really bad idea. You want to write the right tests, right? It's not more testing, it's more, better, smarter testing. So a good tester, you just really want to armor the breakable stuff. So what's out there that's really breakable? Say like, your JSON parser that's sitting on some crummy backend that the client gave you. Like, that thing is trouble, right? And that's a definite source of regression, right? So you're the architect, you're thinking, wow, if this JSON parser gives me back objects and they're not good or bad objects or whatever, that needs to have a lot of armor. That's where I'm going to write my unit tests. And I'm not going to write them, I'm not going to test my adder function that adds numbers, right? I know that that's going to work. I'm not going to test it. So I'm going to make those kind of intelligent decisions, risk versus reward. Where do I want to put my effort? Where do I not? And to really do a good job protecting against regression, the best way that we found and the fastest way to protect against regression is not to write a bunch of unit tests. That's kind of if you don't really know testing tools, you don't know that you can, just do simple functional testing. You can just turn on recording, you can use your app for 30 seconds, and you can save that out. You can put that test into Jenkins, and every time your app runs, it builds the app, it builds the tester instrumented build, it plays back, tap on the login button, enter the username, enter the password, log into the thing, enter enter a tweet, say send, and you get it, it appears. There's more to it, right? There's a back end and a test back end and test data and having a repeatable state, but you can just record a simple functional test that has a ton of leverage across your app's code and just stick that into CI, and then you kind of have this beautiful kind of smoke test that is awesome regression protection. So someone comes along and changes your JSON parser, and this other piece of the system now breaks because the backend's different. You're going to have a handle on that, and you're going to know right away because it's in CI. Immediately when you check in that parser change, Jenkins is going to start sending you emails that say you broke the build, you're a bad person, and then you'll know to go fix that. And that's really. And lastly, sometimes I don't say this, but if you see me sitting around here and I'm like staring off into space, that's my normal state. That means I'd like you to come talk to me. I'm kind of in my stage mode right now, but normally when I'm in the audience, I just kind of staring and paying attention and trying to learn new stuff. I'm happy to talk about testing or not testing. So that's me, and I have a GitHub repo like everyone else with all the slides. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. You've heard about how you test stuff. You've heard about what you should test and what your general approach should be for testing. I'm going to talk about something slightly different and how you can turn this great energy you now have about automated testing into something that actually works for you and your team. My name is Jim. I work at a company called Square where we drink spectacular coffee. Yes, we're hiring. We make 2 apps. The one on the left is called Square Wallet. The one on the right is called Square Register. They're on both iOS and Android. Fun fact, Apple doesn't allow product shots using white iPhones or white iPads. You have to use the black ones. And you can't crop them. Did you know that? So Square is a company that lets you take credit card payments. There's a reader that sticks off the end of your device. You can swipe a credit card, charge the credit card, and get paid. The money is in your bank account the next morning. It's really great. At this point, we're processing about $10 billion a year in credit card transactions. Now, if you think about this, this isn't Twitter where if you see a fail whale, you say, oh, well, and you get on with your life. This is people's businesses we're talking about. This is people's livelihood. If you don't get paid, if you can't get paid, that's really bad. So we decided that our apps needed to be really reliable. We decided that as iOS guys, all of whom came from Apple, we were going to talk to the Ruby guys at our shop, and most of them worked at Pivotal Labs, and they were really into testing. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Pivotal Labs, but it's this Rails shop in San Francisco where they're just like, test-driven development is religion. So we built a framework called KIF. This was in May of 2011, and we built this in about a month. We released it about a month later. And that was really great. Of course, in the intervening time, in June of 2011, this happened. Apple announced iOS 5 at WWDC in 2011. It came with a version of UI automation that you could run from instruments that didn't actually suck. You could run it from the command line. You could automate stuff. You could integrate it with the CI server. But there's kind of a problem with that. These are some JavaScript developers. You have to write your tests in JavaScript, and I don't know how many of you are JavaScript developers, but most of the people working on our iOS apps are Objective-C developers, it turns out. Do you want to write your test suite in a different language than your app? From what I know, and I don't have the whole story on this, but as far as I know, the reason for using JavaScript is almost entirely arbitrary. The guy who wrote UI automation was a fan of JavaScript, and it stuck. I think on some WWDC sessions since then, they've gone and retconned this to say, no, your QA people shouldn't have to learn Objective-C, but I think it's just one guy doing what he wanted. So these are Objective-C developers. Notice they've got bigger monitors. And so we made this great testing framework. It's Objective-C. We integrated it in all of our apps, built some great test suites. It's pretty easy to use. It's really straightforward. It's Objective-C. It helped us find a bunch of subtle bugs pretty quickly, which was great. Really helpful. We put it on GitHub. It's got a ton of followers. We've got like 200 forks. We've had like 200 pull requests from the community. Huge success story. Right? There's some other really big companies using it. I'm not here to name names, but we're not the only ones getting huge benefit from testing with KIF. Of course, not to be outdone, we also decided that we hate Jenkins because it's really crufty and it's really tough to automate the iOS simulator. So we built this app called Zap, because Zap tells KIF what to do, and it'll pull your Git repos and run your integration tests once for every commit that happens. We've worked a little bit on making the simulator easier to deal with and parallelizing your builds and making things generally more reliable. So to recap, we've got a great testing framework. It's a huge open source success story. It's finding bugs for us. We've all released it to the community, and we're really happy. And this is great, right? So who wants to see what Square's instance of Zap looks like? Can you read that? So we have several hundred failed test runs, followed by a 8-month period where nothing happened, and then somebody tried to get it running once, and I don't know if you noticed the top of the screen, it still says card case, which is what the app was called like 2 names ago and like a year ago, and so what happened, right? Well, it turns out both of our apps, both Square Register and what's now called Square Wallet, got huge redesigns. And when you redesign the entire UI of an app, you pretty much have to throw out your UI test and start over again. And the prevailing notion on the team at the time was it's not worth our time to write new tests. And I'm just thinking, it's not worth our time to write new tests. Now, granted, there are some people on the team who think that UI testing is like this fad that's going to go away. Maybe they don't have to learn about it. Maybe they don't have to worry about it because it's hard. But I think it's not quite. I don't think that's quite the case. Who knows who this is? Anybody? Anybody? That is Larry Wall. He's most notable as the creator of a little programming language called Perl. There's a book about Perl called Programming Perl, which is one of the early great programming books. In the first chapter, there's a quote: "We encourage you to develop the 3 great virtues of a programmer: laziness, impatience, and hubris." It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. And of course, the entire point of automated tests is to appeal to your impatience, right? You want to know right away when something broke. You don't want to have to spend a bunch of time doing regression testing. It kind of appeals to your hubris too, because you want to have something tell you that your code is great, right? You want to have this whole big amount of proof that says, yes, you are a great coder. But I think we kind of missed out on the laziness part. This is KIF's GitHub page. Here's some instructions on how you use KIF. And that's just like the first half of the page. So we've learned some things. We ran into some pain points, and we learned some things about how, what to do and what not to do. And so here's some of them. First, one of the things that KIF requires you to do is make a second copy of your app target, because there's a second app target that builds the app, but also builds in all your tests. And then when it starts up, it drops into testing mode and it starts running your tests. But maintaining a second copy of your app target sucks. If this one person who is adding a new file to the project isn't thinking about it, they forget to add it to the target. Now, it's taken 3 seconds of work to break all of your tests. That's no fun. Xcode 4 has baked in support for test suites, which is it's kind of nice. It's kind of this concession from the engineers at Apple to people who have common sense, saying, yes, no, automated testing is good. Maybe we should support this somehow. Of course, I could edit this to say Xcode 4 has baked in support for test suites, and UI automation doesn't use it. Right? UI automation, if you want to run your UI automation tests from CI or anything like that, you either have to go into instruments or you have to run a separate command line tool. It's just like this entire separate world. If you've never used it, this is what the built-in testing support looks like. There's a testing action on all your schemes in Xcode. You can just add your testing bundles. And there's these checkboxes on the right side where you can turn your individual tests on and off. Send Testing Kit is smart enough to run just a single test if you want to just focus on a single test. It's pretty nice, actually, it turns out. Being able to record tests is nice. The way KIF works is it uses the accessibility labels on all your views and all of your UI elements, which is good because you want your app to be accessible, and forcing you to set your accessibility labels on everything is 90% of the work in making your app work with VoiceOver and things like that. But having to type all of those in manually, it's really fussy. And it's just kind of time consuming. It's the major reason why a lot of our developers didn't really enjoy using KIF. This one really came up. Your testing tools can be useful during development even if you're not following TDD dogma. We've done a bunch of other stuff around making our app testable, as the other guys mentioned too. For example, we wrote a small HTTP server that mocks out our server endpoints. Now that's good because you want your test data to be repeatable. That should make sense to all of you that that's what you want to do. But it's nice even, you get into a case where your server guys haven't written that new endpoint for you yet. And so now you've got this testing tool, but you're using it in regular development. It's pretty cool. Or for another example, have you ever found yourself working, like 8 screens deep in a UI navigation controller? And you're working on this app, but every time you relaunch your app to test your newest code, you've got to drill down through it. And your cycle of relaunching your app starts taking like a minute. And it's annoying, and it's really frustrating. So, why don't you just set up your testing suite to drop you into the right point in the app, get you there as fast as you can, and then you start poking around again. So those lessons learned, I'd like to tell you about something today. It's called the new KIF, because of course you can't put numbers after things anymore. That's not cool anymore. But we've learned some things, right? This is we have a new version that's coming out soon. It's OC unit based, so it works with the testing support in Xcode. One really cool thing about this is that you can run tests just like you would run any other tests. You can just hit Command U instead of Command R when you're in the middle of developing in Xcode. It's very, 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 very simple. It comes with a bunch of handy tools to help your development process along. Interestingly enough, this whole effort was started not by any of us at Square, but by a third-party contributor on GitHub. We just got a pull request out of the blue one day, and he's like, I think there's a better way of doing this. And all of us just looked at this pull request, and we said, holy crap, you're right. And we changed everything. We changed the entire API. And this is an example of something where great ideas can come from anywhere, and there's nothing that requires something from us to make something awesome. We haven't quite released this yet. It's going to come out in the next month or two. It's open source. It's a relatively active mailing list. And I'd like to invite all of you to join us. So to give you an idea what it looks like, this is a video I recorded of how you set up a project to use KIF. It's a little bit of setup, but this is the UI catalog sample code that you can get from Xcode. It's just Apple's sample code. Haven't changed it at all. I also cloned the KIF repo to a directory, incidentally, inside the UI catalog folder, but it doesn't really matter. So here's what it looks like. So this is the app, kind of just as you normally run it. Comes up in just a second. You can see all the different stuff that you can do with UIKit. I don't know if any of you ever run this, but it turns out UIKit's a pretty cool framework. I don't know if any of you have ever used UIKit before. So I'm going to just switch to the Finder, find kif.xcode proj, drag it over into Xcode, and then all I have to do is go over here and add a new target. I'm just going to use the standard Cocoa Touch unit testing bundle target. Call it, I don't know, integration tests. Pretty good one. And just have to set a couple of build settings. Had a couple of build phases. All of you have probably dealt with Xcode before. This shouldn't look that foreign to any of you. Add KIF as a dependency, link link your bundle with GIF. Also requires core graphics, but none of this is really that hard. And I just want to show you that you can go from 0 to testing in just like, this video is 3 minutes long. That's it. And then you have to just change a couple build settings. Come on, you can do it. Sorry, Xcode was being a little slow when I recorded this. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced Xcode being slow. But this is kind of where the magic happens. There's this setting called bundle loader. And when you run a bundle target, it'll load your bundle into an app. And then we go down here and we set this something called the test host. And this is how the testing stuff works. So just set this to the bundle loader. And then you just change one other thing, so you can run category methods from bundles. I don't know if you guys know about -all_load, but that's kind of useful sometimes. And then all we do is we go over here and we add our testing code. And this is the file we just got from the template, and we'll just go down and change this line from stfail. I've copied a few lines over here, but you can see what it does. It's pretty simple stuff. It just tells it to tap some views with accessibility labels and change some switches. And then I'm going to just subclass give test case instead of send test case. And import give.h. And now I'll run this. So just go over here and press and hold on the run button. Sorry, we got to set up the testing support first. Add this. And I just go over here to the run button, press and hold, and you change run to test, and it runs your tests. And you can see instead of tapping around, it's using my app for me. So that's all I have. Thanks. If you want to know any more, that's my Twitter handle. That's my GitHub, and we'll be around for questions just like everybody else. Thanks.
All right. Before we get to the drawing, I want to introduce Kevin Rowling from CI Simple. He's an exhibitor here, and he wants to tell you a little bit about what they do.
All right. Good morning, guys. My name is Kevin. Again, I'm the founder and CEO of CI Simple. I think I've talked to probably a lot of you guys out there. These are a lot of great presentations. I heard a lot about automation and continuous integration and Jenkins. How many of you guys are running some sort of automated testing solution for your apps? All right. Did you guys set those up yourselves? A lot of you guys? Yeah. Was that a fun thing to do? Do you guys want to do that again this weekend? No? All right, yeah, so CI Simple is essentially your automation in the cloud for specifically mobile apps. So there are a lot of hosted CI solutions out there for like web frameworks. We are specifically focused on mobile. So what that means we can do is we can automate your builds, we can automate your code signing, we automate your OTA distribution, and we also have a testing platform as well. We can automate your tests. We do UI automation. We can surface videos of your UI automation tests actually running on simulators and devices. So we essentially have taken this idea of automation, which is really painful and difficult to set up, and we've moved it into the cloud. So if any of you guys are interested in trying out the service, just go to cisimple.com/renaissance. We're in a private beta where we've got a special URL set up for you guys so you can get right in and try it out. We're also giving away 2-month free coupons. Just send us a tweet on Twitter at CI Simple with the RenIO hashtag, and we'll hook you guys up. We'll send you a DM with a coupon code. So again, my name is Kevin. I'm going to be right out here at this at the booth. So if you want to come and talk to me, get a demo, just come give me a shout, and we'll hook you guys up. All right. Thanks a lot.